This is a MapleSoft digital education podcast.
Hello, my name is Stephen Furino and I am the Assistant Dean for Online Studies in the Faculty of Mathematics at the University of Waterloo. I'm also one of the chief collaborators with the University of Waterloo and MapleSoft with a project called Mobius, which is a new design and development system for digital assets for STEM courses. With me today is Matthias Kniebusch of Hochschule Bremerhaven. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, as faculty members, we have lots of choices about what we do with our time. Why did you choose to do things about e-learning and online education?
Well, there are two different approaches. One is I need supplementary materials for my students that they can use at any time they want to do. The second approach is we are creating actually a blended learning concept for a new undergraduate program in wind energy systems, and this blended learning type requires 80% of online content, especially for me in engineering mechanics and in mathematics as well.
So what sort of things would you do as supplemental material?
So there are two different things. The first thing would be an online assessment. There we are quite experienced after some years. And the second would be a more lesson type part, where the students can go through in advance before they come to the lecture, or just to work after the lecture had been passed on this material, doing their own work, use a more active approach with math apps or other stuff.
So it's in some context it's preparatory material in advance of the lecture, in other cases review material, gone to class, listened to the great Professor Kniebusch, but I've forgotten something and I get a chance to review it.
Exactly, that's it.
So tell me more about what's done online at your university and in Germany.
Well, what is in the past years we also other universities developed lots of contents, especially online courses and so on, mostly as a supplementary material. Due to the situation that we have lots of universities in our country, we don't need those long or distant learning systems like you have in Canada. So it's mostly a supplementary material that is to be used in the first years of a student at the university to cover material in mathematics and make them reaching the level we need at the university. That's one approach. So it's just linking high school and university together.
Now Germany has a pretty good reputation for high school systems, so am I hearing that not all German students who leave high school for an engineering program are as well prepared as the universities would like?
Well, I think there is always a difference between what we want them to know and what they think they already know. So we have to move towards each other, and it depends from school to school which skills they have. And probably you can finish your high school just with language and a bilingual system in history, but in the end you decide to become an engineer, then you should have some problems with mathematics and you have to do more work in this field.
So you've talked about the move from high school to university. How about professional training? So I'm in the wind energy sector, there's a new development. Who does that training? How is that done?
So this would be my second approach. The students we are looking forward to are students that are actually working with wind energy companies, and they are not able to do a full-time study. So they're doing the working and in parallel they do the study. And for those people it's necessary to have online material to do all the learning and so on they want to do. Some universities started before we began, but in principle the approach is quite new to us.
So thinking that online learning is new, and we've been teaching for many hundreds, several thousands of years, what are the elements that make online teaching, what do you think are the elements that make online teaching effective, at least equally effective to what happens in class, or perhaps in some cases better? And maybe in other cases it's the only thing that can be done. But what makes e-learning effective?
So there are two different things. First, the student is able to choose at what time he wants to do what. That's one part. The other part is we need material that's completely interactive. Interactivity does not mean just to create some PDF files and give it to the student. We need to have elements like interactive math apps where we might change values due to sliders or other things, just to evaluate how systems behave, for example. That's more theoretical, I know, but...
Well, both points I think are really valuable. When I think of the difference between my son's work habits and my work habits, I'm a very early morning person. My son believes that early mornings should be forbidden. So if he wants, I think of him at university, if he wants to do something at 2 o'clock in the morning, he's not going to find a professor like me to ask a question to at 2 o'clock in the mornings, and he should be able to just do it when he's interested in doing it. When I think of how we train football players, and for North American listeners, viewers, football means soccer, we don't lecture at them a lot. They train physically, they do football. In the same way, I think mathematicians need to do mathematics a lot. And that's much better done by doing questions and answering them and getting some feedback rather than simply reading or listening.
That's right, and I agree, especially when I prepare a lesson. Then it's just one slide or two slides giving new material to the student, and then will come a question showing up some special problem or that could be answered very quick and fast. It's like a question within a lecture hall.
Right.
You just ask your students, you get 1, 2, 3 answers, and then you go ahead with what they told you. So when I present material, then they get initial questions probably. They ask them, and depending on those answers, we might change our content further on being continued.
So one of the things that I liked about asking questions online was I actually get to see the responses. I had a very embarrassing moment. I've been teaching for a long time, more than 30 years. And there's one particular course I'd been teaching frequently, and I had assumed that all students understood my definitions. And the first time that I used clickers, gave a definition, gave an example, then asked a question where I expect everyone would choose the correct answer, D, and of the 5 choices it was a uniform distribution. And that was a pretty real-time painful understanding for me, because I had just assumed incorrectly that everyone knew what I was talking about. But in that sample of 180 students, only about 1/5 actually knew what I was talking about.
Wow, so different experience in engineering mechanics. One of the lectures I like most, my own lecture of course, is on shear forces, bending moments and that stuff. When I introduce this, it's perfectly done on the board and discussing with the students and giving it to them. The typical experience is they go back home, try to do my examples, they fail. They tell me later on. Now, after I've done some material in Möbius last year and gave this to my students, they said, well, it would have been a good idea to have this before I did my exam. So this new approach using Möbius and the possibilities we have with this online system are a real good help for every student. And probably in the future there won't be any problem with misunderstanding or just having a wrong feeling about how secure they are. And
certainly I was wrong. And I think that's one of the advantages of the digital world. I get to know more quickly and more accurately who understands what, when. The human touch. So one of the reasons I like teaching is because of that human interaction in a classroom. And I'm sure that social expectation goes a long way into the behavior of students. So what thoughts do you have about how we protect that human interaction or support human connectivity online? Or maybe is it even necessary in certain situations?
So I think I'm a typical man of doing real lectures together with my students. I like this type of interactivity. But in some places and in some programs, there's no possibility for having this. So we have to choose different opportunities, let's say, to say it positive. And when we think about blending learning concepts, then there's one online part, and the other could be Skype conference or so. So we always have office hours or something like this via the internet. So to have a similar feeling like you might have in a direct contact during a lecture.
So keeping the instructor individually involved with the students is important, rather than. So for a MOOC, there might be 100,000 students who have no direct contact with the instructor, and you're saying that that direct contact is actually pretty important. We have to find a way to do that.
For me, it's very important, but there I have to mention that the numbers we are talking about in wind energy systems, for example, in this new program, will be around 20 to 25. That's very different from courses in massive open universities with several hundreds of students. So I will handle those 20 to 25 students during Skype conference and so on. But I need all the different approaches to a student. The online content, the Skype conference, and any other possibilities to address them.
So there are topics that come up whenever I talk with people about online learning or e-learning. And this may not apply in your situation, but I'll ask the question anyway. Time to completion. So we know from many American schools that students can take a very long time to complete an undergraduate degree. Do you think e-learning can accelerate the time to completion? Will it drag it out, or maybe it has no bearing? Your thoughts?
I think it would accelerate how they come to finish their study. It's a question of attitude towards the study. When they are quite young, coming to the university, they still have to learn something to build character. And that's a higher impact than any way we try to teach them. And after they reached a certain level, then this online material will help them enormously to reduce the time for achieving their grades.
So once they have a certain level of academic discipline, then the online learning can move things along faster.
Yes. Main topic would be the intrinsic motivation that they should have. And
an ancient problem.
Yeah, maybe, but it's not. Study does not mean to have a coffee in the morning and extend this to lunch.
Right.
Study means to do what you want to do because you have a certain goal to achieve.
So thinking of that age group that you just mentioned, the people coming to university, say the age group 15 to 25, how do you think they look on e-learning as opposed to the group who would be my age, which I won't give, but it's 40 years older?
I think they are really curious about this, since they grew up with Facebook, with YouTube, and all the other materials they are used to. There I'm afraid of another thing, that would be the culture of using books. They always are using Facebook and Wikipedia and so on. They have those fields to enter some questions, and they get immediate response from internet. So same, by the way, using online content. They give their answers to some questions, immediate feedback would be returned. Well, when they have to use books, and I'm a friend of using books, then there is no field where to ask a question. You have to go for the contents table of contents, or you have to move in the back and looking for the keywords.
Or you have to read.
And you have to read, and you have to read. But 1/3 of the students, when I ask for books and how to use them, laugh. 1/3 is turning the faces to a red color, and 1/3 does not understand what I'm talking about.
So I'm a huge fan of books. They're probably the biggest household expense that we have. And I think they represent an intellectual stamina that's exceedingly important, but is not so common nowadays. So one of the disadvantages, I think, of the internet is that attention spans have grown small, and often are question specific. But if I want to understand something deeply, I need to spend time at it. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on having people spend a comparable amount of time to learn engineering mechanics or the history of the Spanish Armada.
Education always takes a certain amount of time depending on the type of person you are teaching. And there is no shortcut. That's my experience so far. There's no shortcut to achieve any goal. But the way to reach it makes a difference. So online material could help with this. But you need additional material, the old books. I like books as well. I collect them and I'm a real friend of them. And it's a kind of cultural technique to use them. And I'm afraid that some of our students might lose this cultural technique and due to this computer approach.
So students, the age group 15 to 25, you're saying has clearly adopted the digital world.
Right.
Some of our colleagues have not. Do you think they will? Do you think there will be a cultural clash over this? Do you think they will simply migrate out with time as they retire out? Or do you think that digital learning will simply pass away in 10 years and we will return to what we've done in the past?
They need to look at positive examples to be on this track as well. And it's not a question of biology to move them out of the system. When they see that this online material will work and the effort you need to prepare is reasonable, then they will be on this track. So in my university, I got 2 colleagues in electrotechnique now bringing online content by terms of their questions and so on and into this online world as supplementary material. That would be a real help.
So let me shift topics considerably. Maybe in Germany, money rains from governments to universities.
Oh, that would be great.
But it doesn't happen in Ontario. Do you think there's going to be cost savings in moving to e-learning? And if so, where would those cost savings come from?
My personal opinion.
Personal opinion.
I cannot imagine that there will be any cost saving.
Tell me why.
You have to prepare the material, that's one part. You have to adjust material by time. Preparing real good online material needs factor 5 to 10 compared to typical standard material you use in class on campus. So this time you must pay anyway. That's one part. The other part, some colleagues are afraid of being obsolete. There will be no use for them since we have enough online material. But my opinion is we always need this human lecturer because education always needs a direct contact between both. So I'm not a friend of pure online education. I have some doubt whether it's working perfectly.
Well, I think
or it needs longer time.
I think we're only in its infancy, so it's going to need a longer time to prove itself, and that human connection clearly is very important. How it plays out in online learning is not so clear to me. I would think in some cases, a relatively small number of cases, for a sufficiently motivated individual, maybe I'm an engineer and there's a new technology coming, along. I just need access to the material and I will teach myself in the same way that I would have done it from a book or a training manual 25 years ago. It's a little hard for me to believe that a 17 or 18-year-old person leaving high school, coming to university, is going to come with that kind of personal discipline. And so the social expectation of having some human connectivity, I think, is important. It's not clear to me how that human connectivity shakes out, though. So, for example, in one of the courses that we teach at the University of Waterloo, we use a question and answer service called Piazza. And since we've adopted Piazza, attendance at office hours has collapsed. But participation on the question and answer service is huge. So amongst our 1,600 students in the course, they viewed threads in Piazza 4 million times. There is simply no way we could deal with 4 million visits to office hours. But because they can go, as you said earlier, at 2 o'clock in the morning and look up the question or ask the question when they need it. So there may be other ways to express that human connectivity.
Well, I tried this with my students. I'm piloting my engineering mechanics stuff and mathematics as well now for 3 years. And once, 2 years ago, a student asked for having such a forum for discussion and asking and answering questions using MapleTA at that time and our learning system. I offered something like this to them. No one used it. So it might be because they could show up during office hours or have a talk to me every time I'm on campus. I'm curious what's going to happen with the next students coming up in this online environment in wind energy systems. It will start September this year with Mathematics 1A. Probably these students will use this online forum or chatting or whatever more intensive and ask questions and try to get answers via this. But I'm curious, as I mentioned before, about this.
So thinking about that curiosity, are the students in this new program, are they all German citizens? All German citizens and all fluent in German?
Yes, they're all German citizens, fluent in German. The English is, let's say, different. They're able to read, probably to write, but the spoken language is quite different. So the course will be in German. All material, with the exception of books, will be in German as well. And they will do their daily work with different shifts. And so they need to come to our system at the time when they want the contents. They will be typically off campus, just online working, with the exception of 4 different lectures they have to attend on campus. So this is one part of our blended learning concept. We have on-campus lectures, 4 times 90 minutes, and we have 80% of the material using Möbius and MapleTA to be brought to them.
And because they're not on campus and they're physically separated, their way of interacting is perhaps more likely to be in some sort of messaging service than walking over to your office.
Right.
One of the reasons I asked about German citizenship and German language is that in our 1,600 students in the incoming class, roughly half are international students and perhaps 2/3 have a first language which is not English. So I'm wondering if there's also a cultural or comfort factor in people willing to use a more anonymous service. And I simply don't have enough data points to know if that's the case or not.
So typically in our university we have the undergraduate programs just German students with some exceptions. It's different in the master program. That one in the wind energy system mostly sees Germans in embedded systems. They mostly come from China and India. And this program is, for example, held in English completely. But that's not my topic. I'm not in this field.
But I just want to be clear, that means I'm a Chinese student coming to Germany learning in English, because English has become the common language of education. Now that in itself is interesting, because I wonder what happens to e-learning. Does it mean that Chinese students can now take courses from German universities in English from China as a possible future?
That might be possible in the future, right.
So, online education possibly makes it easier for us to attract students and audiences that are different than the ones we had before, for many reasons. Has your university thought about different audiences, or larger audiences, or new audiences for your schooling?
So, increasing the number of students on campus is always limited due to buildings and those facilities. In this area we are limited as well. We are always thinking about creating new programs, or just modify actual programs to fit with the actual demand. But creating new programs might need this electronic approach using e-learning materials and so on. But this again is a step to the future. No one knows where we will end up in about 5 to 10 years.
So you've been involved in online education or e-learning for a while. What do you see as the largest risks or downside to e-learning?
Would be failure of the system breakdown when students are working. For example, when I first used an online assessment system, the students were not comfortable with the system. It does not react well, and so on. If something like this is going to happen with new systems, it will be a disadvantage, let's say diplomatically.
And you're thinking that if we become wholly reliant on new delivery systems, and they're poorly implemented, or the electricity goes out.
Okay. Then it just depends on the author of the material. It could be done well, or and this again needs time and huge effort to prepare good online interactive material.
If I could wave a magic wand and give you one thing to help with your e-learning efforts, what would it be?
Another one giving me the opportunity to do 3.
Induction, yeah.
This question I would like to know before. There are so many things. It's not money that counts. Human resources to create material.
And what kind of human resource? Because there is a difference. There's authors, there's people who do digital production, there's animators, all of the above. There's the administrators at the top who give the political support that's needed for this, or your time.
Okay, time dilatation would be a wonderful thing as well. No, back to real world. Actually, I would think about people creating content. As long as in politics it has been discovered as one of the most important points in developing education, it always comes back to the point where we have to think about contents and how to prepare this. And depending on my actual work, there's need for more engineers involved, engineers as an example, and scientists, to create this content. That's my most wanted thing at the moment. That might change within the next year, I don't know, so please ask again later.
In 1 year's time. Thank you very much, Matthias.
Welcome.